Who does God bless? Who does God bless? Gordon MacDonald wrote a book entitled The Life God Blesses. And before we look at what these verses in Galatians say, let's just do a little survey of Abraham's life, okay? So put something here in the Galatians chapter 3, and we're going to spend some time back in the Old Testament. Go back to Genesis. Okay, let's start in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. So here in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, this is where God calls Abram to leave his home country and to follow him. And he promises all these blessings unto Abraham. And it ends with God saying to Abram, all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Now, in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, is there a nation of Israel yet? No. Has the law been given yet? No. Okay? Turn the page from chapter 12 to chapter 15. So God had promised Abram that he would have many descendants, and the promise was delayed, and the promise was delayed. And what's happening here is this is where Abram kind of wants to adopt Eliezer, his servant, and saying, well, God is so slow in keeping his promise. Let me help God here. I'm going to adopt somebody, Eliezer. And God says, no. He's not the one. He's not the answer. He's not the fulfillment of this promise. I am going to give you descendants from you and your wife. Okay? Natural born child. And he says they're going to be like the stars in the sky, so numerous. In other places, he says they're going to be as numerous as the sands on the seashore. Okay, now somebody read verse 6 for us, 15:6. Why was Abram considered righteous by God? His belief. His belief. And in this context, it means he trusted that God would do what he said he would do. Paul in Romans says it that way. Okay, turn the page, chapter 17, verses 9 through 14. So here we have the giving of the covenant of circumcision. What did the Jews believe was a sign that they belonged to God? It was the evidence that they belonged to God. Circumcision, right? Best estimates are that the covenant of circumcision was given 15 years after God told Abraham, you are righteous in my eyes because of your faith. He wasn't made righteous because he was circumcised. He wasn't made a follower of God, a person of God because of circumcision. That happened 15 years later. Okay, now turn to Genesis chapter 22. So finally, God fulfilled his promise to Abraham, gave Abraham and Sarah a son, and this son kind of grows up, and then what does God tell him to do? Kill him. I want you to kill this son of promise. And Abraham obeys. Abraham obeys. He takes him out and he prepares to sacrifice his son. This is about 40 years after God declared Abraham righteous. Okay? If we would turn to Genesis chapter 32, in Genesis chapter 32, that is where Jacob's name is changed to Israel. And out of that, all of a sudden we have the nation of Israel, almost 200 years after Abraham was declared righteous. And, as we'll see in Galatians, the law isn't given for another 430 years. So even before the law was given, even before the law was a thing, God had already declared, Abraham, you are righteous because of your faith. Because of your faith. So, just from this little survey we've done of the life of Abraham, what are some things that we know did not contribute to Abraham being righteous in God's eyes? Circumcision, the law, being in the nation of Israel. Okay? None of those things contributed to making Abraham righteous in God's eyes. Yet, even in the days of Jesus, What did the typical Jew point to saying, I know I'm right with God because of? Pardon? Bloodline, that he was part of Israel, that he thought he had done a pretty decent job maybe of keeping the law, and that he was circumcised. The very same things that we just said had nothing to do with Abraham being credited with righteousness. So again, on what basis was Abraham declared righteous? Belief, faith, yeah. Since Abraham was saved, trusting God to do what he said he would do, and thereby being declared righteous long before circumcision, long before the nation of Israel existed, long before the law was given, it's obvious none of those things are necessary or contribute to salvation. So Paul is saying here in Galatians chapter 3 that those who believe, those who take God at his word, that God will do what he said he will do for those who believe, those are the true children of Abraham.